Do you ever catch yourself reaching for food when you're stressed and sad and not even really hungry? You guys, I've struggled with this too. What if understanding and embracing those very emotions could be the key to breaking the cycle for us? Stick around because we've got some tools and steps you can use right now to start making a change.
Well, it's not so much that it's emotional eating as it is that we are eating our emotions.
Welcome back to, try that again. Welcome back to another episode of Connection Over Perfection. Joining us is the incredible Leslie Lindsay Davis, author of books that have transformed how we think about weight loss, emotional eating, and self-love. Moving from using food as an emotional comfort to embracing a life where every feeling is acknowledged, felt, and honored. Her approach to emotional eating is not just about changing what's on your plate, but also about changing what's in your heart. Welcome, Leslie.
Amber, I am so excited. I've been counting down the minutes and the hours until I got to talk to you. I'm just so excited. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Leslie, before we jump into all the goodies, can you just share a little bit how you got on this journey and how you shifted from emotional eating to finding a healthier path for, weight loss and self-love?
But like so many people, I had a huge moment in my life. I call it kind of a tsunami. I don't like to use I hit rock bottom because I feel like that tempts the fates to say, you think that was rock bottom? We're going to show you rock bottom. So instead, I was hit with, this giant emotional tsunami where I recognized that I can, go one way or the other. I can either continue doing what I was doing, and it really wasn't working very well for me, or I could make a decision to do something differently. And at that time, I made the decision that I wanted to get healthy mentally, physically, and emotionally. Now, I tell people if I'd have known how hard it was going to be, I don't think I ever would have gone on the journey. But
I definitely agree with that.
Truthfully, making the decision to get healthy emotionally and mentally was difficult because what I discovered is so many things that I believed were not just imposed on me as a child or a person, but a lot of the beliefs that I had, they go back generations. I'm talking, thousands and thousands of years. They're societal norms. They are generational dysfunction that's come forward. When you decide to start breaking societal norms and generational standards, you're going to get pushback even from yourself. But I had made the decision I wanted to get healthy emotionally and mentally so that I could get healthy physically.
Right.
And it was important to me on a scale of 1 to 10, it was a 20, that I learn who I was and start honoring what I believed in, what I felt, what I wanted, what I desired. And it boiled down to one thing. I realized I'm only in control of me. I'm not in control of anyone else. And the subset to that is my feelings are my feelings, and nobody else gets a vote on them.
Mm.
Absolutely no one else gets a vote. And like I'm saying recently, I've started asking this question, since when did we start doing emotions by committee?
Mm.
Because how often have you told someone how you really felt about something or how you really felt about someone? And their first response was, you shouldn't feel that way.
Ooh.
And then you start thinking, well, should I feel that way? Shouldn't I feel that way? Well, that's really how I feel, but they're telling me I shouldn't be feeling that way. So now what am I supposed to do with that? And what I suddenly recognized was it was very much as if I were to show up and ask you, what do you think of my blue shirt? And you were to say to me, blue? That's not blue, that's pink. And then I would start doubting what I know to be true because you're an expert. You're somebody that I know, like, and respect. And so therefore what you were telling me must be true. So when I started honoring my emotions and actually
Right.
acknowledging what I really felt, even if it wasn't pretty or socially acceptable, I started feeling a shift inside of myself because the tension was being released. I was staying true to what I believed, and I said to myself, what somebody else believes is what somebody else believes. I have no control over that. I'm going to be true to what I believe, what I feel, how I am in this moment, and then it's going to be okay because I'm not trying to deny, because how many times have you denied what you really felt? And it starts that war inside your head, it starts that war inside your body. And then we wonder why we are going for our quote unquote drug of choice. And for me, it was food. We're going for our drug of choice so we can relieve that tension. And it was when I made that decision that I was going to honor what I really felt, regardless of what
Right.
somebody else had to say about it, regardless of how many times somebody said you shouldn't feel that way.
Right.
Then the tension released inside of me, and I let them be what they were going to be because I knew that I was going to be what I was going to be, and I didn't need their permission, approval, vote, or anything else on what I felt.
That's so huge. Thank you for sharing that with us. And that leads into a few things. This idea, what I'm feeling isn't right because you don't agree. Tell us about your new book because this has everything to do with your new book.
Well, the new book is called What Color is My Shirt?
Right.
And the subtitle is Trusting Your Emotions. And the reason it's called What Color is My Shirt is that's a concept that you can see. We can't see emotions, but you can see what color something is and understand that if somebody tells you that it's a different color, you can see your mind start saying, wait a minute, they don't know what they're talking about. So it's easier to grasp that concrete concept.
Right. I love that.
In order to learn to trust your emotions, if we can start seeing our emotions as a concrete concept, and we can start understanding that what we really feel, regardless of the acceptability by somebody else, if we stand in the truth that our blue shirt is blue, regardless of how many people tell us it's pink, then we can feel that our insides are calmer. So, what I'm doing in the new book is talking people through how to react, how to respond, and how to honor their emotions when they are met with somebody who says you shouldn't feel that way. Now, I'm not talking about when you say, I feel sad, and someone says you shouldn't feel that way. I'm not talking about when you feel happy because something happened and, karma and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about including those times when you feel like you hate somebody. Let's get down to those hard emotions. You hate somebody, you want to see harm come to somebody, and somebody is saying to you, you shouldn't feel that way. Can you remember how you felt like you needed to pull that in and you couldn't be honest with that person because what you were really feeling was not pretty, it was not acceptable, it was, none of these things that we want to talk about. I've already started talking about this in You Can't Eat Love, and I'm going deeper with it in What Color is My Shirt? Start having written conversations with your very best friend in the whole wide world, and that's yourself. Start having written conversations about what you really feel, and then respond to yourself. And I do this. Well, of course you feel that way. Why wouldn't you?
Right. And that's huge. So I just want to go back a little bit and talk about those emotions and those feelings because so many people skip over this step in their healing process, in their healing journey, just in life in general. And they want to skip the feeling into more of the healing, more of the change and fixing it and moving past it. And from my experience and, working with clients in my own personal life is that that's the key piece is that before we can really go in and work through something, we have to honor those feelings because they exist and they're there for a reason. They arise for a reason. I don't know if this is true for you, but we get scared of those feelings. Get scared that they identify us in some way that that's who we are when we feel things. So say, like you said, I'm super mad at somebody for doing something. I feel rage and I kind of just want to hurt them right now. Not that you're going to, but honoring that feeling that you have because you've just been hurt, you've just been betrayed. There's such a process in our emotions, anger, and then, okay, I see the anger, I see you anger. Why are you there? Okay, that makes sense why you're there. What's really happening? Oh, sadness. Okay, sadness is there. Why are you there, sadness? And like you said, asking questions, getting curious, talking to your best friend, talking to yourself, getting to know you, why these things come up. The more that we do that, the more that we understand why we're having these emotions. People get so scared that, just like invalidating one another, it's so hard for people because we feel like we are condoning that emotion or that feeling. And that is scary. There is a difference between saying, yes, do this. Yes, I agree with you, versus, wow, that makes sense that you would feel that in that moment. That doesn't mean that you're going to stay there. That doesn't mean that you're going to act on it. It's just saying, I see you. We all just want to be seen and heard. And people are screaming, going crazy, saying, do you see me? Because, like you said, when we express how we're feeling, we have a lot of people saying, you shouldn't feel that way. My friend Hunter, he says, don't should on everybody. Don't should on yourself. So true, because then there's this block. And now, like you said, we're at war with ourselves. And I love that you already threw in a tool, which is an amazing tool. And I don't think that it gets enough credit because it seems so simple, is just journaling, writing that down. Whatever, people have such a thing against journaling. Whatever you want to call it, write it down, use a pen and paper, and just ask yourself questions. Just let it flow, let it out without judgment. We are in such a society with expectations and judgment that we then hold that same judgment and expectations on our own emotions, even when we're in private.
1000%. And I'm laughing because I was reflecting about two years ago. I was really, really, really angry with someone to the point that I wish that they would just die. Make my life easier, just die.
Just go away. Yeah, exactly.
And so I don't call it journaling because I'm one of those people that has this thing against the word, but I write in notebooks. I got a stack of notebooks that I've written in, but I do not journal. I've had people say, isn't that journaling? In your world, maybe. In my world, it's writing in a notebook.
I love that.
We need to use the words that we need to use so that we can use the tool that we need to use. How about that?
Right.
So anyway, I was writing in my notebook and I was dancing all around the subject. And finally, I heard this voice and I wrote this down. Who are you lying to?
Mm.
And I paused and I said, I'm lying to myself. And if you could find the notebook, you could read these words. I'm lying to myself. And then I said, why are you lying to yourself? I sees everything. We are three people. We are me, myself, and I. And in the book, You Can't Eat Love, I talk about them a little bit. Me and myself want us to be happy, but I is seeing everything that we are doing. Me and myself can lie to us, but I is watching. I knows the truth. So I wrote that down in my notebook. And I said, you know what? You're right. I am not going to lie to myself because that's how I ended up in the mess before, was lying about what I was really feeling. And so here goes. And I wrote everything that I felt, what I wanted to happen, how I visualized, the whole thing, the pain, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And when I finished, I felt such tremendous relief. I also felt lighter because I had done what I needed to do to honor that emotion at that moment in time. And because I took the time to honor those feelings dispersed and I was able to move forward. I wasn't left there stuck in battling with them, think of Rock'em Sock'em Robots. I wasn't left sitting there fighting with them the rest of the day, the week, the month, the year, because I had honored what it was that I was really feeling. I had looked at it. I had acknowledged it. Well, of course you feel that way. Why wouldn't you feel that way? This is what's going on. So who wouldn't feel that way? And these are all words that I actually wrote. Like I said, you can come dig the notebooks out. I don't read my words, but you can dig them out and you can find them. As a result of that little tiny bit, I proved to myself how powerful this whole thing is. I proved to my own self that getting these feelings out, honoring the feelings, expressing the feelings, being honest about them is extremely powerful, even if it's only acknowledging my own self. Because as you said, we are desperate to be seen and heard. So many of us run around trying to get other people to see and hear us that we forget that there is one person ready to see and to hear us, even at 2 o'clock in the morning. And that's the person that looks back at you in the mirror when you're brushing your teeth. But that person desperately wants to see and to hear you as much as you desperately want to be seen and be heard. And if we can just start with seeing and hearing ourselves and honoring what we truly think, what we truly feel, and I will tell you, there are times when my feelings can be so overwhelming, I can only experience them for just a moment. But you know what? A moment is more than I would have done before. Before, I would have been tearing the pantry down, looking for something to eat in order to stop the pain. And that's what we run from so much, is the pain, because we don't know how to just sit and how to just experience that feeling. Now, I'm not advocating that you sit in whatever hard feeling for an hour or so. Sit in it for just a moment. If you can only do it for 2 breaths, that's fine. Feel what you're feeling for 2 breaths. People who are in the midst of extreme grief, sometimes they can only feel that grief for just a tiny, tiny, tiny moment. I get it. Feel that grief for that tiny, tiny, tiny moment, and then move on. The next time it comes up, the next time that wave surges up, you might be able to feel it for just a tiny bit more, and that's okay. Don't put boundaries and parameters and steps and paths and all these things on yourself. But, you mentioned anger. One of the things that I realize is anger is like an algebra problem. When I'm battling with anger, I ask myself, what's really going on right now? What is it that's really going on? And when was the last time or the first time that I felt this way? And by asking myself those questions, I can figure out what's really going on. We talk about the straw and the camel and all that kind of stuff. That's oftentimes the way anger works. It just takes that one tiny straw and then the anger, volcano explodes. But if we can get honest with ourselves about what's really going on, then we can figure out, as you mentioned, it could be sadness, it could be rejection, it could be abandonment, it could be all of these things, but we won't know unless we ask the question.
Just a quick interruption.
Yo, word up, this is Ethan from the Nonchalant Perfectionist podcast. I'm so glad you tuned in here, man. Hold on, just real quick, did you know that this podcast, as well as my own, are part of a much larger world called the Podcast Connection Network? Yeah, we have some pretty amazing shows hosted by even more amazing souls. And look, we're just waiting to be discovered. You curious? Yeah, I know you are. Head over to the link in the description below. Trust me, you won't be disappointed.
Okay, now back to the show. And I love that, because for me, I always say the first step in going anywhere is getting curious.
Yes.
And something else you mentioned, talking about sitting in those tough emotions, I find that some people have the opposite, is they're afraid they can never get out of that tough emotion. And so for me, I said, okay, I'm going to allow myself 15 minutes to be in this emotion. And timers help me because it gives me a pattern interrupt and it keeps me focused. It doesn't allow me to spiral, because that fear that I was going to stay in that dark place, especially if you have been in a very dark place and it's very hard to get out of. So for me, that timer or even an accountability partner saying, hey, I'm feeling this way. I'm going to allow myself to feel this. Can you check on me in an hour? And so that permission to feel, but knowing that you can do things, you don't have to stay there. And I think that this is where, for a lack of better terms, coping mechanisms or distractions, those are not terrible. We need them to really do life because we can't be in these emotions all of the time. In those moments, okay, I'm honoring these feelings. Now I can go do something else, kind of, distract myself or focus on something else that I need to do. And then, in another 2 hours, I'll see how I feel. I can allow myself to feel those again. I think it's this really black and white mentality that definitely keeps us in that tug of war. How do you feel about that?
One thing that I would like to say is I like the idea of timers. For me, I limit myself to writing for 3 pages. When I get to the end of these 3 pages, I'm finished. I haven't used timers, but that's a great suggestion because sometimes you can only feel something without being overwhelmed by it. And that's the other thing. We don't want to be overwhelmed by our emotion. We want to feel it, but not be overwhelmed. So setting a timer, even if it's just 1 minute, set that timer, feel it, know that that timer is going to go off, and then you can go do something else. Because as you said, we can believe that we're going to get stuck in that emotion. Now, what I like is that you were talking about coping mechanisms and tools. If you think about your car, you've got rear view mirrors, you've got side view mirrors, you've got all these mirrors in your car, correct?
Yeah.
Those are coping mechanisms to help you drive down the road. Because if you didn't have those coping mechanisms, those mirrors on your car, first of all, in order to check behind you, you would have to turn your head all the way around like an owl, 180 degrees to see what's behind, right?
Yeah.
If you didn't have those side view mirrors, you'd be having to lean forward, look back around the headrest, or, lean back and look between the seats or whatever so that you can see, what's coming up on the sides of you. So we accept coping mechanisms in our car. And I use a car analogy a whole lot because it's something that we're all in. If we can accept that we have these coping mechanisms in our car, let's accept that it's okay to have healthy, reasonable, moving us forward, allowing us to be ourselves coping mechanisms. And among those can be setting a timer for experiencing a tough emotion for a finite period of time so that we don't drown in it. If you do feel that you are drowning in that emotion, I strongly recommend that you reach out for help as quickly as you possibly can, even if it's to call a friend and say, hey, I need some help.
Right.
When you're drowning, look for the life preserver.
Exactly. There's so much strength in that. A lot of people associate that with weakness, but there's so much strength in that vulnerability and reaching out. Something else you said that I super love that I learned in The Happiness Trap, which is a great book, is those moving forward, moving towards where we want to go, right? With those coping mechanisms and anything we do, we can just see them. Is this moving us toward where we want to go?
Mhm.
Or is this moving us away from where we want to go? It's a really good gauge or indicator when we are wondering about our coping mechanisms
Yeah.
and our distractions, right? They get such a bad rap.
Well, and we can get tied up in not very good coping mechanisms, and we can get tied up
Right.
in, I'm one of the first ones to admit, if I'm having a bad day, it's really easy for me to start binging on Amazon Prime or whatever, and that's not real healthy. Because it creates a whole nother problem.
Right. That's moving you away from your goals.
Exactly. So what I would also say is that we start celebrating if we are having a tough time, if we're feeling some really tough emotions, that we start celebrating, hey, I sat in that emotion for 1 minute and it was okay. Let's celebrate it. Let's acknowledge it. Because then it lets our brain know, okay, it's all right if we sat in that emotion for 1 minute. Everything is still fine. The status quo is still going. The world is still spinning. We didn't spiral out. So then the next time when we want to sit in that emotion for maybe a minute and a half, our brain says, oh, this is going to be okay. So when we do give ourselves permission to do whatever way we are going to experience that tough emotion, let's celebrate that we did. Let's celebrate that we did. Let's honor ourselves for experiencing the emotion. Same thing, if we stand up to someone when we are confronted with someone who says you shouldn't feel that way, instead of responding to them or feeling the tension go inside, I say, let's practice the bend and snap from Legally Blonde. And you simply do a toss of your hair and you turn away or you change the subject. When you walk away from that person, you celebrate, hey, I held on to my feeling. I didn't allow them to run roughshod over my feeling. I stayed in control of the situation. I honored what I was feeling. Think of how empowered you will be.
Right. I think we lose that kind of power also, and we lose that celebration when we try to get the other person to accept our feeling.
Yeah.
We're in a whole different tug of war. I absolutely love that you mentioned celebrating, because it's something that we do not do as a society. We do not celebrate the little things. So important. Scientifically, it gives us that little dopamine hit and it stores a memory in our brain, now gives us evidence. Our brain is like a computer or a file box, and it searches for evidence to support that. Each time that you hold a boundary, that you stand up, that you honor yourself and you celebrate it, you're collecting that evidence, and it then stacks. So you have more of a stronghold, more of a foundation. You building that muscle, and it gets easier and easier to do that, to honor ourselves, sit in those feelings. When we do it in the really small things, we're able to do it in the really big things. It's like a muscle. The more that you do it, the stronger you get. People want to go and try to do it in the really big things, the really tough moments where, say, you are having this conflict with somebody, and then you try to establish that first and practice that then. It's like a crash and burn because you haven't built that muscle. And doing it in the little small things, like you said, I felt super upset, super angry. Oh, I honored that. Even right now, I felt that. It's that release. It like disintegrates this hold that can happen when the emotion comes up and we don't honor it, grows, and it becomes something very, very different than what it started.
It does grow into something else, because think about this. How many times have you been stuffing down probably a series of feelings? Something trivial happens and Mount Vesuvius has erupted. So it does grow into something else. And the thing is, when we do not honor what we really and truly are feeling, all of that stuff has to go somewhere. And as a friend of mine says, it comes out sideways. If you envision a s'more, you melt the marshmallow, you put it between the chocolate and the graham crackers. When we are not honoring what we're really feeling, and that graham cracker and that chocolate are put on top of that marshmallow and we smash it together so that we can eat it, all that stuff is coming out and it's very messy, right?
Sticky, yes.
Yes.
I love that analogy.
So that's what happens when we don't honor. It starts stacking and stacking and stacking and stacking until that little tiny feather just lightly lands on it, and then the world explodes. One of the books that I read that helped me understand that we celebrate everything, even especially the small stuff, called Don't Shoot the Dog. Now, please don't contact the SPCA or anything like that, because it has nothing to do with shooting dogs. But it is about training animals. And when I read the book, I was like, this can work on me. And it talks about the trainers reward the behavior that they want to continue. If the animal touches your hand and you want them to do that, you reward them. If the animal is sitting, you reward them. Whatever it is, whatever behavior that the animal accidentally does that you want to continue, you reward them. So for me, I started paying attention to when I was, acknowledging what I was feeling. You know what? I'm really proud of you. The other day you were feeling really angry and you went ahead and you wrote down what you were feeling angry about. And I know that you felt so much better. And I'm just really proud of you for doing that. Or I'm really proud of you for when somebody started trying to tell you what you should and shouldn't feel, that what you said was, my feelings are my feelings. And they kept pushing back and you just kept repeating yourself and not changing your volume. I'm really proud of you for that. Acknowledging the tiny things, as you said, it builds the muscle, but your brain starts looking for those rewards. It starts seeking them out. Now, the flip side of that is you ignore, absolutely positively ignore anything that you mess up. If you do push back on someone who says, well, you shouldn't be feeling that way, or you give in because the tension is so big that you go and eat the whole bag of potato chips and the entire carton of onion dip. We won't discuss the last time I did that. You ignore that. Absolutely positively ignore it. Make no comment about it. If you have to say anything, just say, oh, well. Because what we want to do is we want to build the muscle of rewarding. We want to build the muscle of feeling. We want to build the muscle of honoring. We don't want to build the muscle of shaming and blaming. That muscle is strong enough already. Right?
Right. And I love this. I really feel like these are the first steps.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some people hear what we're saying and they're like, well, that's not reality. What about being able to learn and grow and take constructive criticism? That comes later. This is the foundation of being able to stand on your ground, being able to connect with yourself so that you can come from a place where you understand what's happening for you first, so that can move out of the way so that you can show up for others for where they are. But if what is happening to us is unclear, we're not trusting ourselves and we can't see where they end and we begin, and it's messy, very confusing, and it's unproductive. It's very disconnecting when we are communicating. These are the first stages of learning to really be able to connect with yourself. I always say healing journey, but my friend Ryan, shout out, he says, this is just life. We're just lifing.
100%. And as you said, we are just doing life. And the benefit of doing life today is that we can have these conversations. You're on one side of the country, I'm on the other side of the country, and our conversation can reach thousands and millions of people who maybe were thinking, I'm broken.
Yes.
And then they can hear what we are saying and they can say, you know what? I'm not broken. I just didn't understand what I could do, what was in my power to do. I didn't understand that these were the things that I was able to do. Well, let me start trying, because we do have to begin with ourselves. Until you master addition and subtraction, you're really not able to teach it, are you?
Right.
So until we master being comfortable with our feelings, or at least starting, you just have to be a little bit ahead of somebody else in order to help them. But as soon as we start not running from our feelings, acknowledging our feelings, that we become, I hate to use the word comfortable, but until we are able to simply feel our feelings, we really are not able to help someone else. All we're doing is living vicariously through them. Do you want to be living vicariously through other people? I don't know about you, but I like my life. When I start living other people's lives, it gets kind of messy, it gets a little bit crowded. What we can do is we get comfortable in feeling what we are feeling and acknowledging, our true emotions. Then when someone comes to us and they're saying to us, this is what I'm really feeling in this moment, we can pull out of our toolbox. We can say, can you tell me more? Of course you feel that way. Why wouldn't you be feeling that way? And we don't get wrapped up in trying to one-up them with our story.
Right.
Because we've already had our story heard by ourselves, by our very best friend in the whole wide world. And remember, we simply want to be seen and heard. So the more we see and hear ourselves, the more available we are to somebody else to see and to hear them, because we are not trying to push their story aside. Hold on, wait a minute. You don't know what tough is. Let me tell you about tough. And then we wonder why they withdraw.
Right. So invalidating. And I love what you said, comfortable. And for me, it really resonated because I never felt comfortable in my skin. I never felt comfortable within myself. Anytime I looked in the mirror, I'm getting even a little emotional. I looked in the mirror and there was such a disconnect. I didn't feel like I knew that person. I always say, the movie Mulan, where she says, who is this girl looking back at me? I felt that to my core. And it's because we are literally invalidating and discounting everything that we're thinking and feeling. And so, really, that first step, like you said, of just acknowledging and honoring, yeah, this is what we feel, and making sense of it begins to connect us so we can feel more comfortable within ourselves, something that feels good. Guys, what we're talking about here today is the root cause. What is going on? The food isn't the problem. The emotions aren't the problem. The eating isn't the problem. It's what's happening within. It's what we're not acknowledging. And I like to say we talk about emotional eating, but I often feel it's because we're not honoring our emotion. Leslie, would you say that these are the first steps that you would suggest to somebody who is trying to work through emotional eating, taking that first step and just really honoring what you're feeling?
Well, it's not so much that it's emotional eating as it is that we are eating our emotions instead of feeling our emotions. And yes, these are the first steps. Let's say you catch yourself with your hand in that cookie jar, or whatever it is, that you realize I'm overeating or I'm eating something that I really didn't intend to eat. Ask yourself this question: what is really going on in this moment? And then take a deep breath and listen. Listen to what's really going on. And you'll probably be very surprised that it's a consequence of something that happened, a day or two ago. And then it's probably tied to some memory from when you were a child that this happened, and now it's being drugged forward. And so all of those things are happening to bring together a perfect storm that you find yourself in that bag of chips. So yes, begin with recognizing what you are doing, your action, which is eating or drinking or whatever it is. And then as soon as you recognize what you're doing, ask yourself the question: what is really going on right now? What am I really feeling right this moment? And then take a breath and listen. The way that I listen to myself is I have a notebook, I have a pen, and I write the conversation back and forth to myself, just as if I was talking to another person. Why do I do it like that? Because then I get the hamsters out of my head, back to the pet market. I want to put them out of business, and I'm able to just leave it. I'm able to, to leave the conversation. Not only do I leave the conversation, but I feel validated for what I'm feeling, because I acknowledge, well, of course you feel that way. Why wouldn't you feel that way? What else is going on? Tell me more. And I write those actual words.
There's so many good points that you're hitting on. One is, you were saying earlier, it's these steps. This is not a simple change. You're changing habits and behaviors. We're just going to use food for this analogy. Something happens, I get triggered, I go get a hamburger and I feel guilty. And I know all of this information. I've heard this podcast. So now I'm like, what do I do? Remembering that we said, just acknowledge, hey, right now, I acknowledge that I'm having big feelings. I'm feeling anger, whatever it is, sadness, frustration, jealousy. I'm still going to eat the burger because I'm in these baby stages. I'm going to eat the burger and say, okay, I ate the burger. I acknowledge and celebrate. I recognized that something happened to me. That's different. That may take a little bit. You may continue to do that for a little while. The next stage might be, I recognize before I get to the drive-through, hey, I'm feeling this. I'm acknowledging it. I'm still going to go get the burger, but I recognized earlier that I'm having this emotion. Okay. The next time it might be, I recognize now, am I going to go get the burger? That's different, right? It's not this all or nothing. It's going to be this process because you are changing a lifetime of a pattern. Here's, I think, one of the big things has kept us safe. We have chosen these coping mechanisms as a way to try to keep us safe. A lot of people will say that our body is working against us. Like why would my body want this hamburger? The idea is our body is trying to say, hey, something's happening to us that's really big. We're trying to say, hey, something's happening.
I love the way that you laid it out in the steps, because that's exactly what it is, that we take these steps and then we move to the next step as we grow. You created the mechanisms way back in order to deal with not feeling what you were feeling, because whatever reason, it was not safe for you to feel that. Now, your brain doesn't know the difference between good and bad, but your brain has learned when this happens, this is what we must do in order to be safe. So when the dinosaur or the saber-toothed tiger is knocking at the door and half the door is broken, our brain knows that we need to get up really, really high so that we can be safe from the saber-toothed tiger. So it's going to do everything it can to get you to climb really high. The same thing with your emotions. Your brain has learned this is what we must do in order to feel safe, because this emotion is bad, it's scary, it's not acceptable. We are going to be thrown, off the island and left to fend for ourselves somewhere in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Those are the stories that your brain is telling you. So if we can take the little tiny steps and simply acknowledge, you know what? Yes, I'm in the drive-through. Yes, I'm ordering the large order of mozzarella sticks, and then I'm going to go over to Cane's and get a 6-piece. But you know what? I know what I'm feeling. I know why I'm doing this, and that's okay.
Right. And we're talking about feeling our emotion. And one of the things that I absolutely love that's super helpful for me is the somatics of it. Where do I feel this in my body? We've been so disconnected from our actual feeling sensation for a lot of people that can come from trauma. They had to disconnect from their body to keep themselves safe. We're reconnecting that. And so one way to do that is saying, where do I feel this in my body right now? Do I feel it in my chest? A lot of times people in the beginning stages will say they feel it in their head. What we want to focus on is more throughout the rest of our body. Where do we feel it? We want to get out of our head and into our body.
Let's feel, let's not think our emotion.
Yes. I didn't know even what feel my feelings meant. Like, what does that mean? I think that's for me where the somatics came in, is where do I feel a sensation? Do I feel a tingling? Do I feel a burning? Do I feel a pain, a pressure, a sinking feeling? Am I nauseous? Am I shaking? Am I sweating? Really just that awareness of what is happening. For me, that was huge. My counselor, she said, the first stage is just recognizing that there's a shift in that you got triggered, that something has happened to you. You shifted. Like that's the micro step, right? And then, okay, something happened. I shifted. What is happening? For me, my palms would get super sweaty and my heart would race fast and I would start to shake. These are the steps of just becoming so aware of what's happening with us.
Right. Yeah, as you said, the different sensations, because the more attuned we can become to the sensations, more easily it is for us to recognize the emotion. When I went on the journey, to figure out the emotions, I knew 2 emotions, basically, anger and happy. And I didn't do happy very well. I did anger really, really well. And then we won't talk about shame and guilt, because I could do those. So many times when we begin looking at our emotions, we need to figure out what it is, because there's a whole rainbow of emotions. And then where are we experiencing that in our body? Because oftentimes, again, remember, your brain wants to keep you safe. It's going to shut off any kind of information coming from your body that is related to that emotion, because it's learned, if I allow the body to feel in my brain, I'm not going to be able to do anything. Oftentimes for me, where I feel stuff is like all my nerves are on fire. I get extremely anxious and tense, and just, it's just like, I was feeling that earlier today. I don't know why. So I need to ask myself, what's going on that you're feeling that? Your brain's job is to keep you safe. And if we can remember that our brain's job is to keep us safe, and if we can speak to ourselves kindly as we are going on this journey, as we are taking these baby steps, and if we remember, there are only 3 choices. There are good choices, great choices, and not so good choices. There are no bad choices. We watch the language that we are speaking to ourselves when we are exploring and discovering our emotions. Our brain is going to start releasing the grip on keeping us safe, because our brain is going to start recognizing these little tiny steps are safe, but it's not going to release until you're teaching it over and over and over again. As we talked about building the muscle, we need to build the muscle of our brain feeling safe. Our brain feeling safe with feeling the emotions, with experiencing the emotions, with actually sitting in the emotion for a moment and recognizing we can do that and be safe.
I love that. And that's so huge, is that we can feel and still be safe. Like that's a foreign concept. But as we're talking about feeling those emotions, I just want to challenge the listeners. This is kind of a heavy topic. It hits home for me. I was feeling a lot of things. So I challenge, we're just going to take a deep breath now and just take a moment. Are you feeling something? Did you get triggered? What triggered you? Where are you feeling that in your body? So we're just going to take one deep breath and kind of just listen to our body and become present, see what happens for us. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy. You don't have to sit there for an hour. Just getting in touch. For me, my shoulders relaxed because, we're talking about feeling our emotions, and it can be really vulnerable. And sometimes that's really tough. And so tense up, like clench, hold that in. We don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want all that stuff to spill out. Then people will, then I'll have to feel that guilt and that shame and all of those things. It's okay. It's okay to feel those things. We're here in the present. Leslie, I could literally talk to you for hours. We didn't even hit a lot of the topics that we wanted to. So we'll definitely have to have you come back. What is one thing that you would leave the listeners who may be struggling?
Well, first of all, Amber, I would love to come back again. I agree. I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours, with or without a microphone, with or without Zoom. I could talk to you for
Right.
hours. So this has been quite a delight. What I would like to leave the listeners with is this. You are enough exactly as you are in this moment. Tomorrow you will be someplace else. And if you don't believe that you are enough, I will believe it for you until you are able to believe it for yourself.
I love that. I love that. What a beautiful way to end. Thank you, Leslie. Can you just let the listeners know about all your books, where they can find you? This will all be in the description, but I just want to kind of give you a moment to do that.
Well, thank you so much. The easiest way to find me and anything about my books is on my website, which is youcan'teatlove.com. And my first book is You Can't Eat Love, How Learning to Love Yourself Can Change Your Relationship with Food. It's not a diet book. It's about learning to love yourself. And then my second big book is The Journey from Failing to Healing. First attempts in learning can lead to healthy emotions and loving yourself. And it's the backstory to the journey that I went on to learn to love myself and discover that somebody already loved me. Somebody always did. And my next book is What Color Is My Shirt? Trusting Your Emotions.
I love it. And I'm super excited for that. Thank you, Leslie. And thank you so much for your knowledge and just your beautiful energy.
Well, thank you, Amber. This has been a delight.
The views and opinions expressed by myself and any guest on this podcast are solely ours and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of any organizations we are affiliated with. The content provided is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as medical advice. As always, consult with a trusted healthcare professional regarding any medical conditions or concerns.